All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the Middle East Forums podcast series. My name is Anaf Kalam and I will be moderating today's discussion. We are pleased to have Michael Pregent today, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute and former U.S. Army intelligence officer, joining us today to discuss how Turkey, Qatar, and Iraq are exploiting their U.S. military assets. Mr. Pregent will speak for 15 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A from the audience. If you wish to ask a question, please feel free to use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question, and we will do our best to answer it. And with that, I will turn the discussion over to Michael Pregent. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what's going on when it comes to our allies in the Middle East and how they continue to take advantage of our military bases in the region. So as we look at the Hamas situation, this is where I started to, really look at this. And I focus specifically on Qatar. So Qatar, I've always called it the bar in Star Wars, right? Or it's the Continental in the John Wick series. It is an ally that courts our enemies, that hosts our enemies, that continues to put itself in the way of straightforward negotiations. I mean, Qatar is the broker. Basically, Qatar brokered on behalf of the Taliban when it comes to Afghanistan, brokered on the side of Iran when it comes to, the $6 billion being put in a Qatari bank. Set the ransom payment at almost $1 billion, a little bit over $1 billion per American hostage that Iran took. And the reason I come up with those numbers, and I'm sure everybody in this audience probably does the same thing, so you have 5 dual citizens that are released, and $6 billion go into a bank in Qatar. Frozen assets from South Korea, I get it. But Qatar continues to put itself in this mediation role that continues to advantage our adversaries and our enemies. When it comes to Iran, Iran has the advantage. When it came to the Taliban gained advantage. And when it comes to Hamas, Hamas has gained advantage. And I wrote a piece, and I think that kind of sparked this interest in having me speak about these issues. And in this piece I wrote for The Hill, I talked about how Qatar should not be a major non-NATO U.S. ally anymore. We need to call that out. It cannot host a U.S. base and host Hamas leadership, fund terrorism, foment violence in these violent protests in the United States and abroad, pour money into think tanks in Washington, D.C., where it quiets experts on Israel. And we all know who they are. Those experts on Israel that are pro-Israel in think tanks where there is a lot of Qatari money, they've been silent since October 7th. They've been silent. And when you hear from politicians, the only ask that Qatar has of politicians is to simply praise Qatar as an ally and what they're doing. And you can see how smart Qatar is when it injects economic stimulus into South Carolina. And then weeks later, Senator Lindsey Graham is out there praising Qatar, condemning Saudi Arabia. And in the post-October 7th world that we live in, we still see Lindsey Graham out there praising Qatar for its role in mediating. Part of the argument I made in this piece was that Qatar really has no leverage with Hamas. It doesn't have leverage with any terrorist group that it funds. The leverage that Qatar has is telling the terrorist group that they have leverage with U.S. politicians, that they have leverage with the Obama-Biden, Biden-Obama administrations, and also members of the former Trump administration. And that's the leverage that Qatar has. Qatar has leverage with the United States that gives advantage to our adversaries. And when we look at, U.S. foreign policy wins over the last, since 2020, we haven't had any. We basically ceded Afghanistan back to the Taliban. We've continued to hand Iraq over to Iran on a silver platter, to the point now where the U.S. military has been defending itself against Shia militias, not ISIS, against IRGC Quds Force-backed militias, and again, not ISIS. And we have actually given up on asking Baghdad, the Iraqi government, to actually do something about it, to stop these militias. So when you look at failure in Iraq, failure with using Qatar as a mediator when it comes to Afghanistan, when it comes to Iran, and now when it comes to Hamas, you wonder what we're doing. And these terms, soft power and smart power, were coined in the Obama Biden administration when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. She said we need to use smart power, and that's all I'm really advocating for at this point. I want to use kinetic power to kill terrorists, especially foreign designated, foreign terrorist organizations and designated members. We need to use kinetic actions there, targeted campaigns against key individuals. But let's talk about smart power for a while, for a little bit here. So if Qatar was denied its major U.S. non-NATO status, or told that it's now being threatened, Qatar would do something about that. If Qatar was told we're looking at sanctioning key entities inside of Qatar for funding Hamas, for funding, organizations that we all know have been co-opted by Hamas in Gaza, they would stop. The mere threat of disfavor from U.S. sanctions, from U.S. disfavor, would knock our frenemies back on their heels. Simply telling Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, the former Prime Minister of Iraq, that the United States is thinking about imposing sanctions on his assets and designating him would reset his position. Doing the same thing with Hadi al-Amri of the Badr Corps in Iraq. And I know those are names from the past, but they are two individuals that know when a U.S. base is going to be hit ahead of time. They are the ones that basically empowered these militias during the ISIS campaign. There are U.S. bases inside of Iraq that are being attacked by militias, but those U.S. bases cannot conduct attacks against militias inside of Iraq. To your audience, the audience should know that when we took out the Kataib Hezbollah leader in Baghdad, we didn't launch that drone from inside of Iraq where we have a base. We didn't launch that drone from Turkey. We didn't launch that drone from Qatar. We had to launch that drone, I believe, from Dubai. And when we have allies who won't let us use our leverage inside of their country, and instead we give them leverage, and worse, we give these terrorist organizations leverage, that's an issue. Having a U.S. base in Iraq should not give Iran and its militias leverage. This administration has ceded that leverage, U.S. leverage, to Iran and those militias. Having a base inside of Qatar should not give Hamas advantage, should not give Iran advantage. And then when we talk about Turkey, a NATO ally, and what it has done with S-400s, what it has done to continue to push technology to Russia to be used in Ukraine and continue to bypass U.S. sanctions on Iranian oil. And now, when Hamas leaders are worried about being in Doha and being in Qatar, based on what the Israeli, what the Mossad has said and what the IDF has said, that they're going to target these leaders wherever they are, these leaders started moving to Turkey. And now Erdogan has come out and said, I dare you to do something, meaning if Israel does something, there will be repercussions. So again, Turkey's on paper is not an enemy. Qatar on paper is not an enemy. Baghdad is not an enemy. But in each case, these allies, in name only, continue to give our adversaries advantage. And all it takes is smart power. All it takes is the threat of sanctions. All it takes is enforcing sanctions that are already in place and showing a country what it looks like to be in U.S. disfavor. And we're just not seeing that. And that's one of the issues that we're dealing with now. We're months ahead of a U.S. election. Our adversaries are seeking advantage. They believe they have a green light to continue to get all they can. This looks a lot like 2015, right before the Trump administration, where you had Iran with the JCPOA, where you had the rise of ISIS, where you had Russia moving into Syria, where you had all the precursors of what we're dealing with now being put in place. And now, fast forward to an election year, we have Iranian proxies from Yemen to Iraq to Syria attacking US positions. We have US allies threatening our most important ally in the region, Israel, that if they go after terrorists, there will be repercussions. And the US needs to send a strong signal. Now, something that has given me some I don't like to use the word hope. Hope is not a method, but something happened after we took out that Kitab Hezbollah leader in Baghdad, because Ismail Khani of the Quds Force basically told the militias, hey, don't kill any Americans. Don't kill any Americans in Iraq and Syria. Now, the Houthis have yet to do that, right? So the Houthis are still testing red lines. The U.S. has an option, of course, to take out the Saviz or take out the Beshed, those two IRGC Navy collection platforms that are in the Red Sea, and then one just right outside of the entry. Bab el-Mandeb is what it's called. So something was communicated to Iran, and I hope it's Colonel Kurilla. So Colonel Kurilla, or I call him Colonel Kurilla because that's when I met him in Iraq, in Mosul in 2005, when I recruited a source that helped him catch the number 4 high-value target, the number 4 Al-Qaeda high-value target in northern Iraq in 2005. Based on a raid that we both went on. I was in uniform back then, and General Kurilla is a force. So if General Kurilla was able to communicate any sort of threat to Iran, meaning we are going to target high-value targets, meaning Ismail Khani or other IRGC individuals, and also Abu Fadak of Iraq. And these names they shouldn't be foreign to this audience, but they may be foreign, especially Abu Fadak. He's basically the deputy commander of the Hashd al-Shabi, or the militias in Iraq. He's out of Kitab Hezbollah. He's Abu Mahdi al-Mohandis's replacement, and Abu Mahdi al-Mohandis was killed with Qasem Soleimani on January 2nd, 2020. Well, my point is, in each of these countries where we're having problems, we have a U.S. base. We should have U.S. leverage. We should be able to use smart power when it comes to designations and sanctions. We should be able to use U.S. power to pause and change the minds of our adversaries, and we're not doing that. And we don't know the names of the hostages. I know if we do deep dives, we can find the names of those that were killed in Israel, those dual citizen Americans that were killed on October 7th, and also those hostages that are dual citizens as well. But we don't see them every night on the chyrons on the bottom of news stations. We are losing leverage to the point where I believe our adversaries now believe that if they actually conducted a terrorist attack inside of the United States, they would have 30% of the population somehow believe it was justified, based on everything we saw after October 7th, and our impressionable youth and idiot youth and these woke movements saying that Osama bin Laden, made a lot of sense. Remember that letter to America from Osama bin Laden? So we can't be tough with our allies. We are certainly not tough with our enemies. This Biden-Obama foreign policy team is the same one that gave us the JCPOA, the same one that gave us ISIS, the same one that lost to the Taliban and gave Afghanistan back to them, the same group that has basically stopped even asking Baghdad to do anything about Iran's hold on the country through their militias, is now pressuring Israel to conduct a ceasefire. And you were hard pressed to hear why Israel walked out of talks today or yesterday. And it was because Hamas didn't want to, confirm or deny the proof of life of these hostages. So we have such a weak foreign policy team, and we have all the levers of power, and they're not using them. And our adversaries will seek advantage. Our allies don't take us seriously, and other allies are hedging their bets by courting Russia and China. So this is the world we're living in right now. And that's not even to mention the open border. And I'll stop there.
Righty. Well, thank you for that insightful discussion. We've got a few questions coming in here. The first one comes from Harvey Trayson, who asks, how much have the policies of the Obama administration resulted in the United States' softness on our enemies, or as you called them, frenemies?
Right. Well, great question. And I think we can all see the answer. The Obama-Biden foreign policy team is the Biden foreign policy team. It's the same people, from Anthony Blinken to Brett McGurk, has survived 4 administrations at this point. He's the only guy that can do a 183 times and still stay in position. Or Jake Sullivan, John Kerry, it's the same people, Wendy Sherman. It's the same people that have communicated to Iran, especially, how much this administration, based on Obama embracing Iran, won't take action. So we all know Obama, his two major successes during his presidency, one, the JCPOA, the other one, the Affordable Care Act. Obama embraced Iran in such a way that Democrats believe that they criticize Iran, they're somehow criticizing Obama's legacy. And we're seeing this now. I mean, if you can't win with the Taliban, you can't defeat the Taliban, you can't defeat Tehran, how are you going to take on Beijing and Moscow? And our adversaries, here's a key point. I think this will answer a lot of questions that will follow. Russia and China acted as our intermediaries between Iran with these current talks on the JCPOA since 2020. So they had a front row seat to see how willing this administration was willing to cave. And they were surprised at the concessions being made. And after that, you saw Afghanistan. After that, you saw Ukraine. And now we have the Middle East. The next adversary to do something is China and their positioning. So we're all watching those things, but I don't think, if I was a foreign intelligence officer, I would be telling my decision makers, we have a lot of openings in the United States. This administration is not willing to do anything difficult. We can get in, a special team easily through the border in these waves of people. We get 2 to 3 guys in every day, assemble somewhere, and be able to do things. This is going to be too easy. And I've been taught to think like the enemy for 30 years, and I'm telling you, the enemy is not worried about the U.S. at all.
Well, thank you. That actually certainly does answer a lot of the questions that are coming in here. We have a question here from Steve Munson, who asks, are our allies going after the Houthis for their attacks in the Red Sea? It seems like the Biden administration is doing nothing.
Yeah, so the thing about the Houthis, right? The capabilities they have now were given to them by the IRGC Quds Force. Quds Force advisors are on the ground. Hezbollah advisors are on the ground. And if you want to hurt the Houthis, you have to hurt them through Lebanese Hezbollah and the IRGC Quds Force advisors on the ground. They're legitimate military targets. They're foreign terrorist organizations. They're designated. But more importantly, you need to hit the Savis and you need to hit the Besha, because those are the 2 targeting platforms. If those platforms are taken out, the Houthis start hitting Russian flagged and Chinese flagged vessels, which will do what? Iran and China will put immense pressure on Iran to shut it down or directly threaten the Houthis to stop. And that's how simple this is. If you're simply going to hit, you're going to knock down arrows, right? When CENTCOM says we conducted defensive operations today, self-defense operations, that just means you shot down rockets and missiles and drones. You got to hit the archers. You got to hit the positions. And you can't do it only after they do it. You preemptively degrade that capability, but you really send a message to Iran. When Iran feels pain, this will stop. And Iran has not felt pain yet.
So, on a similar note, we have a question from Dr. Paris Michaels. He asks, will President Erdogan in Turkey ever cave to sanctions, or will he end up running into the arms of China or Russia? If so, where would he go first?
Yeah, so I think I think that's exactly what he's doing already. He's hedging his bets. He's keeping Putin happy enough. Remember, the Syrian template was used in Libya, one that benefited both Erdogan and Putin. They use it in Syria to divide up resources. They use it in Libya to do the same. They get along. China, again, is the pragmatic money behind all of this, the guarantor. If the U.S. turns you away, we're right here. Turkey will have the advantage of being able to lean towards Russia and China in order to gain leverage over soft U.S. politicians to win them back. So to answer the question, I don't think Turkey will be afraid of it. I think Turkey will do everything it can to continue to skirt U.S. sanctions. And why wouldn't they? The Trump administration and the Biden administration allowed them to do this. So until they're told they can't, they will continue, and they have the advantage. It's basically do you want me to go with the Russia and China, or do you want me to stay here? If I stay here, I get to do everything I'm doing now, which is courting everybody. And that's what Qatar's doing. That's what Iraq is doing. And that's what Turkey's doing.
Right. So maybe maybe I should have asked this following question first, but earlier in the discussion, you had mentioned the repercussions that people like President Erdogan have mentioned in the event that the Israelis go after Hamas leaders in Turkey or maybe even in Qatar.
Right.
What would those repercussions look like, and how would they affect our diplomatic relations with those countries?
Well, see, that's what's interesting. Could Turkey, would the Turkish Air Force conduct strikes? They wouldn't be able to. The IDF would be able to counter that. The U.S. wouldn't allow it. But still, it's tough talk. And when you don't hear the U.S. condemn that automatically, and when you don't hear the U.S., remember, 30 Americans died on October 7th. Why isn't the U.S. military going after Hamas leaders? Why aren't we conducting special ops strikes? I'm telling you, if this was Al Qaeda or ISIS, we would have already taken out those leaders in those posh hotels in Doha. We would have already taken out those leaders in those posh neighborhoods in Turkey. I know people that will contact me and say, hey, the Hamas guys live right down the street. I can show you where they are on Google Earth. They're right there. Is anybody interested in this? And we're getting ready to be very interested in that. So when Erdogan says something like that, I would think even Putin would caution him not to do something stupid like that. China would caution him not to do something stupid like that. We're just waiting for the Biden administration to do the same thing. And we're not seeing that.
So, with regards to Russia, we have a question from a viewer, Eric. He asks, how do you think Trump's treatment of Putin affects our enemy's perception of how Trump's foreign policy would be?
Okay, so that premise falls into the Trump favors Putin. It kind of sounds like that.
Sure.
Because I look at Nord Stream 2 and I look at the fact that Putin didn't do anything. Trump understands, just like a lot of us former military guys, and when somebody says, hey, you know what, Mike, you're really going to like this guy, John. And as soon as I know that John was in the same kind of unit I was in, we have that thing called the competition, the big D contest, to see who's stronger. That's Trump. Trump's in that big D contest with Putin, with Xi Jinping, with North Korea, with everyone. So we have to look at that. The guy's not worried about Putin. This is not a defense of Trump, but I think the question had an angle to it. Trump is not giving a green light to Putin. Biden's given a green light to Putin. Remember, it was the Biden foreign policy goal was to get Zelensky out within 72 hours because the Russians were coming into Kyiv. It's the Biden administration's goal to give Putin enough of a win in order to off-ramp, right? They won't give the Ukrainians offensive weapon capabilities. Trump would use that as leverage. Say, listen, I'm going to give the Ukrainians offensive weapon capabilities to be able to do things unless you guys stop. Now, I don't know if any of that's going to work. I think his language to date, when it comes to ending the war within 24 hours in Ukraine, I don't understand it. I don't get it. It sounds like a gift to Putin, but at the same time, it's leveraging a position. So in that, I don't think Trump's communicating anything positive to China as far as a green light to continue. China can take Thailand, or I'm sorry, Taiwan. Putin could continue to threaten NATO. I understand exactly what he meant, and the UN Secretary General understood exactly what Trump meant when he said that if NATO partners aren't paying their fair share, then we're not going to help them. He said that back in the negotiating phases of this thing. Again, not a defense of Trump, but when we use these questions, when you ask a question with the premise that somehow Trump is Putin's favored candidate, I don't think that's the case. I think it's Biden. It's Biden is Iran's favored candidate and China's favored candidate as well.
On that note, do you think that it seems like the Biden administration, despite everything happening in the Red Sea, despite October 7th, still seems to believe that Iran is a power that can be negotiated with, particularly with regards to the JCPOA?
I do. I mean, when they look at Iran, they don't look at the regime the way, I look at the regime, or the way we look at the regime. We look at the regime as an oppressive body that most Iranians are against. And somehow this administration believes that, we can negotiate with them because, this is, I've said across from, a lot of us have said across from people in the Middle East that we know disagree with our positions. And they'll sit across from me and nod and say, yes, I understand. That's a very good recommendation, but that's very difficult. We need more money and time to be able to do these things. And I think this administration has been played time and time again by the likes of Qatar, by the likes of the Taliban negotiators, by the likes of Tehran, and Russia and China have had a front row view to that failure to apply pressure, that failure to use U.S. leverage. So this administration will continue. I mean, there was a defense of Iran right after October 7th. We have no intel knowledge that Iran was behind this. And I used to work for the NSA. I used to work for DIA, and we worked a lot with the agency as well. And when the administration says we don't have any clear indication that Iran had knowledge or authorized October 7th, what they're really saying is we didn't hear the supreme leader get on the phone with the leader of Hamas and say, green light, go. Those things don't happen anymore. Gone are the days where you're going to get a smoking gun in SIGINT, Signals Intelligence Intercept, or human intelligence source. You have to pay attention to the chatter. You have to see all the things that are in front of you. If Hamas commandos are being trained in Iran, and Hamas, the officership are being trained by the Qatari police, those things mean things. Those are the precursors. And, we have key intelligence agencies in Europe and anonymous officials in the U.S. saying that they have not put to bed the fact that Qatar may have known about the October 7th attacks in advance. And these are European intel officials, anonymous sources saying that, there's a lot of smoke, but there's no fire. And let me tell you what fire is. Fire is the intercept that you're never going to get. We're still stuck in that Cold War mentality that the only proof is a intercepted phone call between two leaders saying, the wedding package is on its way. The wedding package will be delivered on October 7th. That's not how it happens anymore. It's the chatter. It's the rolling meeting. It's the in-person meeting. When IRGC officials go to Beirut and Hamas officials go to Beirut 2 weeks before October 7th, they know. It's that simple. Sorry for my long answers. I know we're almost running out of time.
No, you're totally fine. And it seems like you're answering a lot of these questions that are coming in. Let's see. Maybe we can end on this one. We've got about a minute. It's kind of an open-ended question, but
sure.
Do we still need Turkey?
Do we still need Turkey? First off, we don't need the U.S. base in Qatar anymore. That base was there for the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, and both wars are over. We've already communicated to Iran that we're leaving Iraq and Syria. We can move that base to Bahrain, to Dubai, somewhere else. As far as Turkey, we have not been able to use the base in Incirlik. We weren't able to use the base during the invasion of Iraq during Desert Storm. We weren't able to use the base during the ISIS campaign. Remember, Turkey was on the side of ISIS because they were so worried about the YPG, right? So do we need Turkey anymore? No, Turkey needs NATO, Turkey needs us, and we are not using that leverage. Turkey, it has not been communicated to Turkey that you need the United States more than we need you, but no US politician is willing to say that. The North American Treaty Organization should not rely on Turkey's vote whether to allow someone into NATO. I think Turkey should be disqualified, especially under Erdogan. And I know my colleague Mike Duran is on the other side of this. He believes Turkey is a traditional NATO ally that we can use against Russia, China, and Iran. And I agree, as long as Erdogan's not in charge of it.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for that. Unfortunately, we have come to the close of our podcast today. Michael, thank you again for your time and your valuable insights. It's been a great pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hope to do it again sometime. Thanks.
Oh, of course. And for our viewers and listeners, please join us again on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for our Israel Insider podcast with Ashley Perry. And before we go, I just want to let you all know about our 30th anniversary conference on May 13th to May 15th in Washington, D.C. There will be policy panels covering Israel victory, confronting threats from Turkey and Iran, countering Islamism and its challenges, and what actions we can take to bring lasting reforms to higher education. If you want to register for this podcast, you can do, for this conference, you can do so on our website under the activities tab or by emailing events@meforum.org. We hope to see you all there. Thank you again, Michael, and thank you to our viewers for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.